This has been an idea going for a long time that we want to have some educational webinars for folks. And one of the topics that came up recently was navigation, and the fact that there's a lot of us have these navigation devices that help, get us through a ride and help us know where we're going. All of our club rides have a ride with GPS file associated with it. So we make it very easy for people to navigate, but we also know that there's a lot of people who, confronted with the idea of, oh, here's another piece of equipment that I need to buy, may not know exactly what to do to make that decision. So Brian Oberholzer volunteered to sort of give a brief introduction to what's out there. And, if you're thinking about buying a device, this is hopefully going to be helpful for you. So I will mute myself, and Brian, you can take it away.
Cool. Let me see if I can share my screen here successfully. Cool. So just to get started, first of all, disclaimer here, I do work for Hammerhead, so I'll try not to make it a Hammerhead pitch. But for those of you who know me, that's the case. Kind of the motivation for me to bring this in and have this conversation is just an observation on rides over the years with folks who had bike computers who seem to have not completely be aware that they could have routes on them. Some very accomplished riders in some cases were out on a ride and you're watching them not turn where they should, and you're realizing that they didn't have routes on their fairly expensive bike computer. So whether you have a bike computer, don't have a bike computer, this is an introductory level course. And I'm just going to lay some ground rules out here that, first of all, things that we're going to learn about today, where do routes come from? What companies are making bike computers? How do we get those bike computers loaded up with a route? And then how do you access the route when you go for a ride? I'm trying to figure out how my buttons are delayed, so let me slow down a little bit. So who's this geared for? This is not geared for experts. This is geared for folks who might have challenges getting routes onto their computers. Maybe they never have, maybe you don't have a bike computer at all. What we're definitely not looking for is to kind of exercise how much experience we all have. It's going to be real simple here tonight. And frankly, if you are having trouble getting a route onto your computer, you might still have trouble after tonight. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of take a pass through this topic. I'm happy to have it be interactive as we go, but I will take liberty to stop if things get too off track. There's not that many slides to go through, and we can have a conversation as we go, see how that works out. Why care about getting your routes onto your bike computer at all? There's really two main topics here. One is to not get lost, make sure you get home. You might be going out on your own and you're taking a route that you're not familiar with. Bike computer can navigate you through that route. And secondly, if you're on a group ride, it's very helpful for having the team on the same page. One of the classic crash scenarios is that guy on the left turns right and the guy to his right goes straight, and we end up with a crash. So making sure everyone understands what the route is a big help in preventing confusion and potential crash scenarios. The other thing I thought might be worth a quick stop with is why have a bike computer at all? It seems to me, watching folks get into cycling, that often you start out not using any device, and you start to realize that it would be nice to record your activity, and nice to have navigation help, as we mentioned. So then folks kind of drift into using a phone, and a phone works to a decent degree, but you end up finding that the battery life doesn't work very well. The mount for it on the handlebars often isn't so good. And you really want to preserve that phone for an emergency call if you need it. There's also special ergonomic considerations on a bike computer that's built for the purpose, and the ability to pair with sensors more so than a phone can do. So with that, I'm going to go into the main part of the presentation here, starting with where do routes come from? And in fact, routes come from many places, and we'll focus tonight on Ride with GPS because that's the source that we predominantly use in Westchester Cycling Club. So if you see routes posted, and especially in non-COVID days, there will be a dozen rides going off on Saturday, and you could go there and nearly every one of them would have a link to a Ride with GPS route. All of these are tools that are pictured here that you can create a route and you could put them on your device. We're going to focus on Ride with GPS. And honestly, this is one of the things alone that could have a whole night's discussion on. I'm going to go very quickly past it and talk about Ride with GPS quickly. The thing to consider here primarily is that you should create for yourself a free account on Ride with GPS. And when you do that, you'll have the ability to, and even if you don't do that, frankly, you'll probably be able to do importing of rides that are linked to on our website. But it's worth having a free account to ease that import process. It's just ridewithgps.com. And this circle over here on the left side is an example of what is pasted into our website. So it'll be, ridewithgps.com/routes/some number. That's what the URLs look like. And if you click on those from our website, you'll get this view opened up. And that's basically the reference to the route that's going to end up onto the computer. Now, I'm going to mention one more thing on this page, not to confuse everyone, but there's this circle here that says pin.
Ryan, we're not seeing your screen. We're still on the sources of routes. At least I am.
Is that true for everyone?
Yes, that's correct.
Interesting.
Yes.
Did it change there?
No, not yet.
Strange. I'm going to stop sharing and restart. See if that helps.
And while I have the floor, you all probably noticed I put a mute on your profile just to minimize the background noise. And we'll get to questions and comments after Brian finishes. So
I'm going to try sharing my whole desktop and see if that changes the outcome of this. All right, do you see something different now? Are you seeing?
Yeah, it says Brian has started screen sharing, but you can't.
Tonetti, you're out of here.
What?
John Tonetti's out. Kick him out, Maria.
Nothing's popped up yet. Your presentation hasn't popped up yet.
Huh. It's saying share. That's strange. Let's say stop sharing. Wonder what. You hear me fine though, right?
Yeah.
Share screen. I'm now going to try sharing just the window instead.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So this is what I was describing with Ride with GPS. This is the URL I was describing. This is what you'll see on the club website. If you click through, you'll end up getting this page opened. This oval here, I just want to point out the pin. One of the ways we'll talk about before we're done that routes can be added to your devices is by having them on your list in your Ride with GPS account and have them pinned. Pinning is kind of saying, this is one of my favorites. It's something special to me. And there are some easier ways to get the routes to come across onto your device if you hit that button. It's not the only way to make it happen, but That's kind of what I want to call out here. So create yourself a route on Ride with GPS, or not a route, an account on Ride with GPS. And later you could create your own routes on this product, things like that. But for now, all you need to do is click through on the routes provided on the club website. See if this will transition for me. All right, do you see a different page now?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so like the next thing we're going to do is look at the 3 different cycling computer companies. And basically for each one, we'll look at what their ecosystem is comprised of, how to get routes onto those devices, and then thirdly, how to access the route when you're going out for a ride. All right, first up, Garmin. And Garmin has, and again, don't hold me too tightly to complete accuracy. But this is a pretty quick overview of what Garmin provides. They have 4 levels of cycling computers available. They're all called the Edge, and then they have a number that goes after them. As they become newer, that last 2 digits go up. So the 130 becomes a 140, the 530 becomes a 540, and that last one should be a 1030, not the second 830. So 130, 530, 830, and 1030. I'm not going to bother editing it right now. They have a set of applications. There's a web application that is utilized. There's a mobile application, and there's a desktop application. Overall, the orientation of Garmin is to be on their device doing configuration and setup. That's kind of the spirit of it. There is some amount of things you can do depending on which model you have by going to these different applications and doing setup there. This Garmin Express app in the bottom right corner, which is something that you can run on your computer, is geared towards syncing things from the computer onto the Garmin and back. Things like software updates, and we'll see later, even getting routes onto the device. By default with Garmin has to do with connecting the Garmin to your computer and copying a file across. Now, again, there are some other ways to do that depending on which model you have, but I'm going to kind of take this kind of base level description as we go forward. All right, so getting a route onto the device looks something like this. On the left is a Ride with GPS. In the center is, File Explorer on whichever kind of computer you have, and far right is the device. What we end up needing to do is downloading a particular route file from Ride with GPS, and under that More button that I have circled, you can see things like export as a file. That file then gets copied over to the Garmin, which is connected by a USB cable. And so you're dragging the file and putting it onto the Garmin, which looks like a thumb drive. Right? Again, there are other ways that this can be done, depending on which model that you have, but this is kind of at least a historic way to work with files on Garmin. Okay. This is what we do in a ride on the Garmin, and this is a screenshot of the 1030. So once you're going out for a ride, that first page on the left is what you see when you turn the device on. There's a navigation option there, and you can drill into it using these incremental steps, all the way to the right where you see the list of files that you've gotten onto the device. Click on one of those, and for the 1030, it's a touch screen. So you touch the item that you want, it takes you back out, and you hit that road button and another button to start the ride. And then you'll start to get your navigation. I'm going to pause here just to see how this is going in terms of pace, or if there's any questions. This is kind of the spirit of what I'll do in the next 2, if I don't have feedback indicating that something else is needed. All right, I got one thumbs up, so I'm gonna continue on, and it looks like we'll have questions at the end. All right, next up is Wahoo, and Wahoo is, their tagline used to be iPhone-based fitness or something close to that. They really were born out of the ability to use Bluetooth for devices, for sensors, and use an iPhone with it. They even had like this, adapter that you could add on to it so that you could get ANT+ sensors added. That's not part of this presentation. That's just kind of where they're coming from, is around mobile devices. So unlike Garmin, who's geared towards mostly working right on the device to configure it, Wahoo is geared towards using your mobile phone, Android or iOS, to configure the device. So for example, if you wanted to change, and this is not part of routing, but if you wanted to change the data fields that are being displayed, you would set that up on the phone app. It would use Bluetooth to send the configuration across and set up the device. So what you need to know about Wahoo is it's geared towards using your phone to do most things. When it comes to routing, looks like this. On the phone, again, because it's being used to do the setup, you can see this list of third-party accounts that you can link to. One of them, the second one down, is Ride with GPS. So on your phone, which has been paired using Bluetooth to your Wahoo device, you then configure your Ride with GPS account, and that gets beamed across using Bluetooth. So the Wahoo device then knows about your Ride with GPS account or your Strava account, etc. Once that's done, the device has also been set up to work with your Wi-Fi. You then no longer need your phone for this. You can still use your phone for this, but you don't need it anymore. So it's convenient. If you've pinned an account, pinned a route that came off of the website, you then can navigate through these menus, and you see route. I'm looking at this first page. Route shows this next one. You hit the sync button, and the sync button then pulls down all the pinned routes from Ride with GPS. It also pulls down all the starred routes from Strava and likewise on other sources. But again, Ride with GPS wise, you can continually resync with any newly pinned routes without ever opening your phone once it's been set up. You can, just to cover it, you can also kind of pull a route in through the phone app. Might not be quite as convenient depending on your workflow, but that's the spirit of what happens with the Wahoo. When we get down to the ride, it looks like this. Turn the Wahoo device on, it comes up showing the map. Click through to the route using the route button on the bottom left, and there's a physical button underneath the screen in their case. Click through and you get the list of sync routes. Select one using the toggle buttons on the left, up, down buttons, physical buttons on the side of the device, and hit select. That selects your route, and you're back to the first page where you hit start, and it'll start to give you navigation information. All right, last up, Hammerhead has one device available, Karoo 2, and there is a website that is used for some amount of the configuration, but the Hammerhead solution is also geared towards configuring the device primarily on the Karoo itself. On the website, you can see how you can link through to third-party providers like Ride with GPS. So with this device, you need an account. You're logging into the Karoo, and it's the same account that you use to log into this website. Okay. When you with this linkage to Ride with GPS, it will work with that same set of pinned accounts. I'm going to skip past any more with that, because if you are working with a single account, on the website, on the top right, you see add route. When you click there, you have the ability to create a route on the site, but also to import a route. And so that URL that we looked at for a ride with GPS route, like is on the club website, you paste it into this location and hit upload. And that then is connected to the Karoo over Wi-Fi, and without pushing any further buttons, it puts the route on the device. At ride time then, there's a couple options here. That's the home screen of the Karoo on the left. There's a routes application that you can click and will bring up the second page where it's a touch screen. So you touch which route you want, it would drop you back, and then you could start the ride by clicking that road profile. Likewise, if you first click the road profile, you would jump to that map view. And from there, you can select the route using the button at the bottom. Once you're in a ride, there's a screen on the right by pushing two buttons simultaneously that will bring up the ability to drop and add or change routes. So that's it. That's it. Like in the end, what we thought might be worth doing someday when COVID has lifted is to kind of meet down at Greshfit and have a workshop and have people bring their devices. If there's questions, we could work through details. But for now, I'll open it up for questions and see if we could refine any of the things that we've said so far.
Go for it, John. You're on mute.
Hey, Brian, this is Jack. The Karoo will all bring down automatically bring down anything that you pinned in Ride with GPS too, right?
That's correct.
That's really handy.
Yeah, I can speak to the Karoo just because I'm most familiar with it. It will. There's no other buttons that are needed at that point. Getting the route onto the dashboard, which can be done by pinning on Ride with GPS, is what's necessary there.
Brian, John had a question. John, we can't hear you very well. Sorry.
So, that's a new one.
Sorry, we can hear you just fine in terms of
But
the
you
voice
sound like
volume,
a cat.
but it's very garbled, unfortunately.
No, you're.
John, you sound like you took
If you want to
helium.
type in your
Sorry.
question into chat, I can read it out to Brian if you want to put it into chat.
I might just.
Maria, can you take am I still sharing my screen?
No, I stopped
Yeah.
sharing just so I can see everyone. Yeah.
Awesome. I was kind of.
One of the things I was going to ask Brian is when you were showing the Wahoo, which I have no familiarity with Wahoo, only Garmin and the Karoo. And the thing that I wondered is, since it's so phone based and so on, how do you search, like, how do you find anything on once you go to your routes? Like, one of the things that I think is handy on the Karoo is that I don't actually like the fact that everything's pinned, but I can easily get over that because of the fact that I can search so simply.
Yeah, I don't want to misrepresent Wahoo. I had used Wahoo kind of exclusively before the Karoo. As far as I have always had this habit of managing the list of routes, so I didn't have like 100 pinned routes.
Yeah.
I would adjust that so I had the ones I cared most about. So it was relatively short list and would be able to find it pretty directly that way. It's not because it's not a touch screen device and
Right.
you're navigating with buttons, the options for, you're not able to type on it. So that's the approach that I took, and it was more than okay, just to have.
So you're just more organized in your ride with GPS.
That's, and I still do that to this day. I don't accumulate.
So now, you know how you are with photographs? That's how I am with ride with GPS. Anywhere I've ever thought of going, any place, I have pins for thousands of rides. But I just wanted to find out what the capability was for
That,
a while.
unless someone else knows another trick, that's the one that I used, and it worked fine.
And so to differentiate between the three, the Garmin has, at least in some of the models, has touch base interface for folks who are kind of used to using a phone, kind of, if you're not that technical, but you know how to use a phone.
The top two, the 800 series and the 1000 series have touch screens for Garmin.
Right. So just like for folks who are thinking about, well, what's going to be an easy transition. And I also wanted to comment that just reiterate what Brian said at the beginning, which is this is not meant for you to, if you have a device, go, oh, yes, this is very clear. It's just to show some differences and to give you kind of a flavor about how it works. Like he said, hopefully we'll have some future in-person things that we can do. And there's certainly tons of information out there that will help you if you choose to get a device. And you can also network within the club to get a friend to just help you in the meantime. But I just wanted to say that while we were waiting for John's question.
Is that Doug with his hand up?
Yeah, and Brian, if you don't mind, I'll moderate a little bit because
Awesome.
I see the chat and John. John, do you want to give it a try again? No? Okay, then I'll read. So John's question was simply to know he's using Garmin 705 and was wondering if there's any experience with that unit.
I am not familiar with the 705. As far as I know, there was the 100, 500, 800, and 1000. So that's a new one for me. I have not seen it. I don't know if anyone else here has.
Great. And then, Brian, why don't we let Doug speak and then I'll go back into the chat and pick up some of the messages there.
Okay, thanks. I'll be very brief. I have a Garmin 130, as you know, that I got a couple of years ago. And I was frustrated that the file format that it insists on for routing is a FIT file. And what I was told is, well, that's the file of the future, and GPS and GPX type files are going to be going away. Is that really accurate, or are they all viable? And again, it may be extra credit learning, but can you talk a little bit about the format of files for routes?
Yeah, I don't know that anything's going away. Things go away very slowly, so I wouldn't generally worry about that. I do know that Garmin recommends FIT files and prefers it. The other thing that's interesting, I think, is that what comes out of all these devices when you're done with an activity is a FIT file. So, I'll speak about the Karoo since I know that one. That's what is being recorded. All of your second by second location, your powered, if you have a power meter, heart rate monitor, whatever sensors you have, all that second by second is accumulating and recorded, and it's recorded as a FIT file. And then that gets sent up to, or one more thing, in Strava. Most of us probably have Strava. That's typically a FIT file that's being sent up. So I would say the predominant file format is FIT, and it seems like they're aligning around it. I think other file formats are probably going away slowly as most standards change.
Got it. Thank you.
There's some good back and forth about Ride with GPS that folks are chiming in. So I'll skip over that. And there's a question from Ed about any general comments about price and battery life for the 3 lines.
Great. Which line? Sorry.
For all 3. So just a bit of a comparison.
I know that I'm gonna do a hand wave here. because I'm not completely sure. I know that the Hammerhead is $399. I know that the Garmin's top out at $599. That was the last. I know that they have a 1030 plus now. This was 1030 was up at $599. Maybe Doug can tell us what his 130 costs. I don't remember, but somewhere around $200 up to $600 in that line for Garmin. I'm going to say the Wahoo, I believe, are theirs are broken into black and white and color. The feature set is generally different. The bottom line is the top of the line is the Roam, and somebody remind me the bottom.
Bolt.
The Bolt, thank you. I had here's the very original one that they don't sell anymore. But the Bolt, I think that starts at $250 and goes up maybe to $350, $400, something like that.
What about battery life? Do you know?
That is, all over the place. The Karoo, I can say we have 12-hour battery life for reasonable use. It's one of these things where you can turn all kinds of things on that can change your battery life. The high-end Garmin's have good battery life, and my experience with Wahoo is that it also does. So I would think that the high-end versions of those have 12 hours or more. As you go down in the line, I don't know. There's also this kind of, if you look at the forums, you'll see people complaining based on their own experiences, and that can vary by the age of the device. It can vary by things like the temperature outside and the details of the use cases. So to get to a real crisp answer there, you can get awfully nerdy in an attempt to be clear about it. But I would say roughly, count on 12 hours or so from all the high-end devices in the lines.
Okay, but don't worry about it going blink in the middle of a ride.
Well, obviously, if you didn't charge it, it could. But historically, this is
subject to some level of care.
Yeah. If you're taking care of it, it shouldn't be random. I know there's probably folks on the call here who could say that their devices suddenly weren't as good as they used to be, and pick any of these manufacturers. And I know there's a couple of folks who bought Karoos recently because their other computer's battery had become not so great, but that's just the nature of batteries over time.
So for the people who are here, again, you sort of saw this overview. Are there any topics regarding navigation that you think we could cover in a future webinar before we get to a point where we could actually do some hands-on stuff for folks?
I would just like to comment that I make a lot of routes on Ride with GPS. And I just think that for people who are going to rely on their navigation device on their bike, they really ought to take a look at the route on Ride with GPS and look at some, especially places where there's a lot of quick turns. It's like looking at a map before you rely completely on your GPS system in your car. That you're likely to be happier with your navigation device on your bike if you have a sense of what your route is like.
So that's one of our topics, I think, is to teach people better understanding of how to use that application. Sorry, Brian.
One of the great things on Ride with GPS that they just added recently is a heat map. So if you're unsure of a road, you can turn on the heat map and see how often cyclists use it, which will help you to avoid some very heavily trafficked roads.
I think that heat map's only for a paid for account though, right, John?
Oh, you could be right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other, I'm trying to watch the sideline here a little bit. The paid account also will give you the ability to add queues to routes. And I think it also enables turn-by-turn directions on the phone app. These things change over time, so that may not be the case still, but that was at one time.
I know I have a paid account on Ride with GPS and I get all that stuff. I'm not sure if it all goes away when, you know, I turn that off, but it's worth, I don't know how much it is. I think it's like $40 a year, maybe less. So
Actually,
Yeah, Don, for sure, you can create routes at no with not paying. You know, the basic
Yeah.
function is you can log on and create an account. And I'll throw one thing in. It's a Hammerhead thing, so excuse me, but there are two plugins for Firefox and Chrome that will give you a button that while you're on Ride with GPS, you just hit the button, it'll put it onto Karoo for you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I thought you were going to talk about how I could read my books on Karoo, but that's just a joke for folks because it's an Android operating system. So Brian used to always call it a Kindle.
That was because the first one was so big that it was more like a tablet, and that was not a flattering comment, by the way.
So no, I know, but so Brian can't be biased because he does work for Hammerhead, but I can be because I'm a Karoo user, and one of the things I love about it is that I can, with my old eyes, that I can actually see it. Not only the typing, the you know, whatever, you know, right turn on whatever, but I can actually see the map incredibly clearly. The one thing I don't think it has, though, is Michelle Garg just pointed out, some of the computers allow people to follow you. That's a really nice piece of functionality in your opening statements when you're saying, well, I guess you could do that on your phone as well. But do you want to talk about that kind of functionality, Brian?
I know Garmin supports that. Other than that, it's kind of futures. It's not supported today on Karoo.
Okay.
It's, you know, you could probably say any feature and I could say it's in the plan, you know, but not available today. I'm not sure about Wahoo.
So really, that's just for folks.
Oh,
Sorry. It's really for folks who might be riding by themselves, because obviously if you crash by yourself, that's the whole idea, is that if something happens to you, you know, your partner or friend or who might be keeping an eye on you will know that you haven't proceeded. And
all three of them, I believe, has this ability to share a navigation link. You know, so that's something different than I was talking about. So on Garmin, you can have your Garmin friends, and if they're nearby, you can detect them. But otherwise, each of the solutions allows you to export a link that you can share with folks who can then see it on a browser. And if your spouse wants to, you know, see if you're on your way home, that can be used.
both Strava and Road ID have apps that allow others to follow you. I'm not sure how to activate on Strava because I know mine's turned on and I can't turn it off. So I haven't figured that out yet, but and I think with Road ID, there's a separate iPhone app that you have to activate.
okay, it's just a kind of an interesting thing. Like, again, our part of our goal here is to have a separate device, not to drain the phone, right? So.
Michelle, this is Jim and Brian. I have to say hey Brian, hey Michelle. So
Hey,
I have
Jim.
to say that I kind of have screen envy when I look over at your ride computer. I have a Garmin and it's nice, but I can really see your large Karoo screen very well. It really helps. That would be my next one probably.
I'll send your payment after we hang up. Thank you.
I want to say the same thing. That's one of my favorite features is that I can read it. I can't always read the little arrows that you're supposed to press to get things started. And I needed to get into the right light in order to be able to read that.
Okay, you should be able to use the physical button if that helps. That's right by that.
Oh, you still can
Image.
do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? Insinuations?
So I'm new to all of this. I don't have any device. I only use Strava. I almost always ride by myself. And I'm trying to figure, I always do the same route over and over because I'm by myself. And I'm trying to figure out what device, not being familiar with any of this, would be best for me. I want to try some new routes so I don't get lost. And that's my biggest
So
fear
there's
that
so there's obviously a cost factor that whatever sensitivity that brings, that's worth thinking about. And then there's a degree of navigation capabilities, and roughly speaking, and depending on which manufacturer it is, it could go from something that's like basically follow the line that was created, and you're kind of it'll give you some indication, turn left now, but really it's just having you move along the line that you planned. And on the other end are devices that are kind of dynamically navigating you. So if you get off of the route, it will redirect you to try to get you back on the route by the best path that you can take. So it kind of gets to what are you expecting to need to do. Some of them will let you do things like type an address and it'll give you a route for you to navigate, or you can press on the screen and drop a pin and it will give you a route to that location. So that's really kind of the nature of the trade-offs. Is, let's say the Wahoo and the lower end Garmin's are more like the one where I draw a route and it will show up on a map. The map is maybe not so easy to read, but you can follow this, we'll call it the breadcrumbs, and you can kind of see that the line goes right up here. Okay, so I'm going to go right there. And if I get off of route, it'll probably flash at me and tell me I'm off route, but it won't help me get back on. Right, that's kind of the base level versus I think I'm going to do this route, but I actually decide I need to go for a rest stop up here. I know there's a Wawa, so I'm going to veer off here and get there. And those types of devices then would kind of give you a new line that would then route you back onto the original route. So that's kind of the difference between the lower end models and the higher end models in this discussion.
since I'm by myself and I'm not really great with this stuff, I probably get a higher end just so I don't get lost, because I'm usually by myself.
Yeah, I mean, you won't be, if price isn't a concern, you won't be sorry. The battery life is typically better.
And then which
as
one
well.
would you suggest then for me?
I can't,
No, okay.
What I'll say, because I have to. Again, I work for one of these companies, but
okay.
I basically, if you are interested in navigation at this higher, so I work for Hammerhead. I said that
Okay.
earlier, but I'll say.
Okay.
We are known for our navigation is probably our biggest strength. So it would either be one of the higher end Garmin's or the Hammerhead. If you're interested in this dynamic routing kind of capability, that's not something that Wahoo specializes in.
Okay. Thank you.
I was trying to show the screen when you're talking about the breadcrumbs of my Garmin 200. So this is, I pulled it up, but you can't really see it, the breadcrumbs, so she could see. But so I use that for a long time, but I'm always riding with other people. And the breadcrumbs is just a line, so you can basically see when you go off track, you go to a different, you're going in different directions, just like a little dot that's following along. And it was always really very accurate, but I think if you're by yourself, having that nice map interface, like just to concur, Like I started with this many, many years ago, just because I'm like, I'm a Luddite. I can use, cue sheets. I don't need all this fancy stuff. And now the comfort that I have, and this is riding with other people to the original goal, to be able to know where I'm going. And if I'm in a group of people with people all over me, and we're all using a device, except for Greg Ridge, where's he? I'll be able to turn when we're supposed to turn. Sorry, Greg, I know you're muted, but
I'm here. I heard that. Thank you.
His device did not go
I heard you
beep
that
beep.
time.
That's the other thing, that you get the nice beep, and you know that the turn is coming. And Greg says his device did not beep. So it was just the one time.
Brian, can you speak to the devices, whether they have a signal that there's an upcoming turn?
Yeah, so the Jan, you had the Crew 1. Did you get the Crew 2, did you say?
No, I haven't.
So one of the things two things that Crew 2 added is a beeper and phone pairing. So you'll get text notifications of text messages and incoming phone calls. That's the upgrade for Crew 2, besides the smaller size. Garmin has a beeper and Wahoo has a beeper. Hello. Am I still there?
Yeah. Sherry, of my experience, I had two Garmins. I had an 82S, which is a really old version. And then I think a friend gave me a 530. And basically, I never used them. I tried, and every time I went out on something, on a route, something wasn't working quite right. And I had friends with Garmin's and they were complaining about them. And so I saw no need to get a better one. I have a Karoo, and I love it.
Thank you.
The other thing that you can, and you're making your decision, that you might want to consider is just searching for the kind of help documentation that's out there. Because one of the things is, once you get into it, it's, unless you have a really kind friend, it's nice to have some good support documentation. Again, I don't know about Wahoo. I think Garmin's pretty good, and Karoo is really very, very good. And they actually have people who will respond to your emails. So it's just something to consider when you buy a piece of equipment. You'd like to get help for it. You'll that you'll have the support to help figure stuff out.
Maria, did we get through the sidebar topics?
Yes, I believe we did. And
okay.
if folks, if I missed something, have a go at it. Pose your question.
So if you have some friends out there who you think could be better ride participants if they were helping to navigate or doing their share of navigation, point them. Maria recorded this, so we'll post it on the website and so on, and get them to get one. It doesn't have to be the most expensive one, but getting people to learn how to appreciate the benefit of navigation and the beauty of the technology that's on offer is something that I feel pretty strongly about for the club. It's how you respect the ride and respect the leader. It's one of the ways.
Michelle, does it help too if you are out of town and want to go for a ride, a longer ride?
Yes. Yes. Brian had that, I think, in one of his first slides, right, Brian?
I don't know that I did, but I certainly agree that that's a great use. I mean, one of the things I I like doing is kind of doing rides to a destination into places that I've not been before. And whether that starts in Westchester or you're out of town, it's still especially nice. It's kind of the opposite of what Sherry described, where I'll like intentionally go places I haven't been to see what happens. And, you know, having the support of a device is kind of what makes it realistic. You know, the idea of being out there and just kind of hacking your way around and I hope I get home doesn't work for that kind of riding.
I think that's another Karoo benefit is that, and again, that's the device I'm using now, but when you go to the trouble of, and if you don't know how to use Ride with GPS, this is, you know, a little bit whatever, but on Ride with GPS, when I create a route or my friends create routes, we always indicate on the route where the bathrooms are and the rest stops. And I don't know about Garmin, but I know on Karoo that I can actually see those icons. And that's, you know, that's a nice thing to have, to know visually. I mean, if you go to the trouble of marking those things on your map, that you can actually see it on your device.
Yeah.
Basically, anything that keeps you from having to pull your phone out of your pocket. You know?
Again, this will be an advertisement, so excuse me, but on the Karoo, on the map, there's a mapping tool that's part of the dashboard. It's not as good as Ride with GPS, which is the Cadillac. You know, it's great. But one of the things you can do on the dashboard when you're creating routes is you can drop points of interest, and those can be associated with your accounts. I think this is what Michelle's talking about. And so when you go back there and you want to create a route, you persistently have and you can have all the club's standard rest stops. You know, here's Triple Fresh, here's, you know, Northbrook. You know, like you can see all the rest stops and you can kind of click and drag lines around and kind of easily find your way to the rest stop that you want. Or when you import the Ride with GPS route that we talked about tonight, all those points of interest that you've accumulated stay there and are added to the line that came from Ride with GPS. So you'll kind of see when you're near a rest stop if you've added them over time.
Actually, I didn't know that part, Brian, about putting them on your actual dashboard. I was just saying that when you use your Ride with GPS link and import it, that it's preserved in the dashboard and on the device, because the other folks I ride with their Garmin's can't see them after it's imported.
I think Peter had his hand up.
Yep. Hey, Peter. Peter, after you unmute.
Do any of these devices have the ability to create routes during the ride? So
I mean,
suppose you're riding off in the middle of Vermont and you now want to go to a different city.
Karoo, what I know,
there's only one city.
I mentioned this earlier, but I can speak best about Karoo, that you can drop a pin. So if you long press on the map, if you scroll the map to the place you want to get to, you can push on the screen, it'll drop a pin and create a route to that spot, like while you're out on the ride. You can also type an address if you have network connectivity, and it would find that address and route you there. I'm not going to spin
Does
it off.
your phone give you the connectivity?
You can use your phone as a hotspot.
Okay.
Yes, and I believe the high-end Garmin's can do this as well. At least the idea, I believe the high-end Garmin's can type an address and get a route to a destination like that.
Thank you.
I don't believe the Wahoo can, right? That's another, going back to Sherry's question, kind of things that you could do with navigation and routing. We're starting to hit some of the differences.
What about which one can you throw against the wall? Easiest.
You can throw all of them against the wall.
I've dropped my Garmin 3 times and on the 3rd time it shattered. So you might want a case.
Yeah. Just another plug for Brian, but the Karoo is really pretty freaking tough. Mine's hit the floor a few times.
I don't recommend that, but
No, I
glad to
don't
hear
either,
it.
but it was fine.
One of the first things you do for people who haven't a device at all, you want to hook up the safety lanyard. Because the first time I used my Karoo, I didn't have that done. And I was in Italy or Spain and it flew off and ended up cracking. So you want to make sure that you have it, the backup safety net on your device. And so I learned my lesson and I figured out what that strange strap was for a second time around and installed it so that my device would stay on. If it popped out of the holder, it wouldn't go onto the ground.
Good tip.
Brian, did you see Gary's question?
Sorry, no.
Point of interest database. So you can,
Oh, hang on.
On your food.
Actually, there's a whole list here that I need to scroll down to. No, the point of interest on the Karoo is current. So if you go to the dashboard of Karoo and you go to the map, like you're going to build a route there, like Ride with GPS. Whether you're creating a route or not, right click on the map and you'll see the option to create a point of interest of a variety of types. It could be like, what I tend to also do is mark the summits of the high points of rides. So I can kind of see when I'm coming up on the absolute, like I know from here home, it's net downhill, even if there's lots of climbing, you know? And so I'll kind of tag things like, here's a coffee shop, here's Butterscotch Bakery, you know, here's the top of Flowing Springs, you know, and I'll have those kind of scattered around. And so as we're riding by, I kind of can see them happening. So right click on there. And then there's a heart that you can light up or not. If you turn on the heart, it's a account level point of interest. And so it will be there on your map, no matter what route is added.
And this might be a whole nother presentation, but what peripherals hook up? I have an interesting collection of heart rate monitors, and cadence, wireless cadence monitors.
Yeah,
I've read about radar and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, so all of these, I would say all of them, all the way down to the entry level devices, should support most of what you're talking about. Like basically there's 2 protocols that are common. There's ANT+, which is the historically centered, you know, fitness sensor. And more over time, Bluetooth sensors have been also available. And many of these sensors now support either one. I think even the lowest end Garmin, Doug can speak to this from misspeaking, but the one he mentioned earlier, even that will support the Varia radar, which is a great device, by the way, that Garmin makes. Highly
That's correct on both counts.
Yep, highly recommend that. And so I don't think that there's any special consideration around sensors with any of these devices. They should all be good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. That could be another whole, you know, meeting.
I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to kind of hear back that, you know, if there's anybody who hasn't gotten their routes on their device, that would be, you know, I feel motivated to see you be successful with that, whatever the device is. It's just these computers are just fascinating and quite deep in what they can do. And what I've seen through a lot of rides is that most people don't bother to learn about them very much. Often the conversations are interesting after years of riding, that, things like elevation views and whether there's a hill coming up, all these devices mostly can show you that. There's some really helpful features that you've paid for if you have one of these devices. It's worth learning a bit about it.
I'll just be happy if everybody who shows up for a ride with a device has the ride on the device. Like I said in my advertisement, if I never heard that, if I never heard that phrase, what's the next turn again, it would be like the greatest day ever.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for great.
John.